Welcome back to the Brotherly Cubs podcast. I am your little brother Zach, and that's my big brother John. We are your brothers who love everything Cubs baseball. If you enjoy Chicago, Illinois professional baseball, then hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and join us every week as we dive into the stoic, always good juggernaut offense that is the Chicago Cubs.
We like to start off each podcast with a playful question for all 106 of our subscribers. We'd like to shout out to you guys, all of our subscribers, for listening to us talk Cubs baseball all year long. Today, Zach, I ask you, who are the teams heading to the World Series this year?
Well, I will tell you with a classic flip of
Oh, wow. The tip or the flip of the cap there.
The Rangers, I think, are going. I just look ridiculous, don't I?
Just a
The
little.
Rangers are not in the playoffs this year, even though they went last year. I think the Phillies and Yankees are my picks. I would say, I'd root for the Rangers since I live here in Texas. But if the Yankees couldn't make it, or let's say the Rangers were going to make it, any of those teams, if I had to pick a third AL team to get into the playoffs and make it to the World Series, um,
Oh, geez.
no. um,
The man of caps.
and underneath this is a trilby. No,
What else you got in that bag of chicken?
I'm going Phillies Yankees. Who do you got?
I didn't even think about the American League. I guess when we talked about this, I was thinking more National League.
Okay, who do you got in the National League going?
I'm gonna go Padres.
Okay,
About them, I think they really acquired a lot of bullpen depth. We had mentioned, they acquired Dylan Cease in the offseason. I think they have a lot of depth. I think they're scary offensively. So the Brewers, I mean, you really can't count out the Brewers. I think, they're dangerous and they have a lot of speed, a lot of defense. It seems like they have extremely just timely hitting. They make the big plays when they need to. I think the Brewers are one to watch. And I think they have something to prove.
yeah.
Without Counsell and who is this band of misfit toys? That I think a lot of people are kind of writing off. A lot of people obviously are rooting or not rooting, but they think Dodgers. So maybe the Diamondbacks, but the only thing with the Dodgers is that they don't really have, I think, the pitching to sustain a long World Series run.
Yeah. No, I hear you. The Cubs just beat them in a series recently, so
Right.
they definitely aren't. They do have the offense, but yeah, I mean the health too is important for them, staying healthy, pitching wise. Bueller falling off a cliff, yeah. It's interesting. Bobby Miller falling off a cliff. Yamamoto, Glasnow were good, but then outside of them, you know, yeah,
Yeah, I just think obviously their offense is always going to be there, and so that's kind of what bails them out. I do like the addition of Michael Kopech. I think
yeah.
he's a really solid arm, even though we've absolutely raked on him. Rake with a K, just to make sure. But yeah, I think the Padres and Phillies, like you said. I think those are two really safe bets. Phillies, I think, are maybe more hungrier. They haven't won in a while, right? I mean, not like they have a huge playoff drought or World Series drought.
I mean, I don't know the last time the Padres won the World Series either.
Right. Yeah. So I think the Phillies are really dangerous, and they probably have the best chance.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe right next to the Dodgers, but look out for the Padres too. The American League, I was just kind of thinking about it today, and I came across Austin Hedges' 69th home run.
Mm-hmm.
The Guardians. The Guardians. I think he and the Guardians are one to watch in the American League.
You think they have the starting pitching to sustain a run?
I don't know. I mean, Who do they have starting? I guess.
Shane Bieber.
Where is he? Did he get? Wasn't he injured though, or no?
He has been injured. They have Tanner, however you say his last name, Bibby,
Maybe. Yeah.
which is a
I think
conjugated
it's.
Spanish version of Shane Bieber.
I think it's
Um,
Bybee, but
Bibby, Bibby,
Bibi,
Bibby,
BBA.
Bibby. I don't know. They tend to develop pitching really well. They have a good pitching infrastructure,
Yeah.
which is lo and behold the reason the Cubs, hired. Uh, yeah, think of his name, Carter Hawkins, the pitching infrastructure for the Cubs.
Nobody knows his name. He's just some random guy that sits in the room and
He's a character.
the character.
So
Oh, yeah.
speaking of the playoffs and the World Series, since we're a week away from the playoffs here, in order for the Cubs to make the playoffs for next year, they would probably need to win 90 games. So says Craig Counsell. He said, "quote We should be trying to build 90-win teams around here." Uh, a bit of, I don't want to say a passive approach. I mean, he's definitely in a way calling out Jed Hoyer and possibly Carter Hawkins and Tom Ricketts for their approach last year. What was enough to get into the NL wildcard race is about 85, 86 wins, and so they based their team around, it's okay to win that many games to get in, and lo and behold, the Diamondbacks made it to the World Series. So the Cubs had that approach. Counsell is refuting that, saying, "Look, we could end up winning maybe 84 games this year, and it wouldn't be enough. All the teams in the wild card race, um, the Mets, the Padres, the D-backs, they're all going to win about 90 games, and so that's what it's going to take." And it was also mentioned to the Athletics, Patrick Mooney, and his question about what they do to make it up next year. Counsell mentioned there's a big gap, which is true, 10 games behind the Brewers. But it also kind of was a double meaning, right? As in, well, we're 10 games back, but we also feel like there are things we can improve on for next year. There's a big gap that we need to overcome. So that was a pretty massive quote here at the end of the season. Craig Counsell taking off the gloves and getting ready to hopefully go for a big off season here. We'll see. But obviously very exciting to hear him, dive into that for sure, right?
Yeah, I don't even think the goal. I was thinking about this quote, and I was listening to part of the was that North Side Bound,
Cub.
or,
So
or no? What is it? North Side. What is it? What is the podcast? I want to make sure I cite it right.
it might just be called
North Side Territory.
Cubs on deck.
Well, North Side Territory.
North Side Territory with athletic writers, right?
Yeah, and they were kind of mentioning, Counsell and that quote, and I think you have to aim for 95 wins.
Yeah.
Aim for 95, you land at 90, 92.
Right.
There just has to be, but for me, it's like a different philosophical take on how you build a team. I think you can't just budget like, sneak in, like you said, like the Diamondbacks and get, an 85, 87 win team. It's just not going to happen. They do need to slug. I mean, we're going to talk about some things, obviously, some takeaways from the season, but they need to slug more. They need to just have a different approach as far as free agency.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, I mean, you have to have guys that, want to come here, but, also I think just kind of, this is off script as far as what we're talking about, but, you kind of wonder, and I think a lot of people wonder this is, does Jed Hoyer have the resources to do this, or is he financially restrained from the Ricketts?
Yeah, and that's a good point. We could definitely delve into that for sure. As to what level they'll go to, in the off season, because that would make a big difference, I think. But yeah, so we wanted to present 5 takeaways from the 2024 Cubs season, and obviously we'll have more podcasts about what we want them to do in the off season. But first thing is the offense. I would say and uh, the massive amount of just unpredictable, I wouldn't even say wind, but just weather fronts coming into Wrigley and having bad weather. The Cubs just seem to not be able to get as much slug at Wrigley this year. Uh, I had heard a little bit about this from Locked On Cubs, from The Athletic. This started to gain traction in August this year because summer is when you're really supposed to see the offense light up between May and June. We did not see that. The Cubs went into their lowest stretch of the year in May and June and into July. Should have seen the offense really get on fire. I wanted to present some numbers here for the audience. A 677 OPS at home for the Cubs. This is a team OPS versus 746 on the road. They had a 70-point better OPS on the road the entire season. This is a large, massive sample. So the biggest spreads we saw were that Seiya had a 906 OPS on the road. So basically dominant type hitter, best of the league type hitter on the road. 740 at home. Michael Busch, 861 on the road, only 693 at home. And then smaller sample size for Paredes, closer to like the 70, between 70 and 80 plate appearances. 891 OPS on the road with the Cubs versus 347 at home. 347 at home with the 70 plate appearances. So obviously that's a terrible OPS, but only 70 something plate appearances for Paredes, and 891 on the road. Just shows you that he was a much better road hitter this year in general. But I wonder if something at Wrigley had, I don't know if it's just playing in front of a larger crowd or what it was. Ian Happ was the only player to actually play better at Wrigley than on the road. So the Cubs need to figure that out next year. Maybe that's getting another slugger. I don't know. But the offense underperforming in that sense, but not playing well at home. That is very difficult in the past. The Cubs play very well at home, especially on those like weekend day games and stuff like that. So that's the offense will need to do better next year. And that's the takeaway from this year is just the terrible offensive performance at home for the Cubs. And then, John, do you have any comments on some of the other players that have underperformed for the Cubs this year?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, Miguel Amaya comes to mind a little bit. He did turn it around a little bit with I think he had gotten rid of a leg kick or something like that, or a toe tap. And so it really did, improve his average. And I think it shot up to, what was I mentioning, 240 or something like that at one point. Obviously, he tapered back down. His OPS obviously is not where you want it to be. He's a serviceable backup catcher. They obviously need to go out and get somebody like a Danny Jansen or Elias Diaz, somebody of that nature. I think that's got to be an obvious target for them in the offseason. Horner, again, so another trade candidate. He was the first trade candidate I think that we mentioned, but yeah, he kind of underperformed, and I think it was Brendan Miller that was mentioning that he's got the best WAR per dollar or something like that, or projected WAR per dollar. Yeah. I don't really care about that. It's like
he's a good defender.
He's a great defender, and a lot of people were just kind of, torching Brendan Miller for that, just kind of, mentioning that, defense is great, but he needs to slug. Like he needs to, there just needs to be more offense to, verify a spot at second base versus somebody like Triantos. So Swanson, obviously, Dansby Swanson is another one. And I was thinking about him on the way home. I thought a lot about the Cubs on the way home, listening to these podcasts. He, from what I have seen from the games that I had watched, he seemed like he had a decent season, but I don't know what his numbers are right now. For paying what you're going to pay, someone for a 7-year deal and $150+ million, it's like you obviously expect way better performance. You don't expect to have a deal like, like Jason Hayward, type of deal where you're paying this guy tons of money, maybe great defensive value, but offensively he's just kind of falling off the table. Um, Hendricks is another one. To me, it's great. Kyle Hendricks really put in a lot of great years for the Cubs, and I appreciate obviously what he has done for the whole organization. I hope that he can remain with the organization as some kind of coach, but I think he wants to pitch next year, so he is kind of fallen off. The beginning of the season was pretty disastrous. What was it, the first 7 or 8 starts? It's like, okay, how long are we going to let this thing go on? I know they only had so many options. With Justin Steele was injured right at the time, so
I sorry to interrupt you. I remember doing the math like in May, and I remember thinking, because he had a 12 or something ERA, and I remember thinking if he like shuts down the remainder of his starts, he would have like a 5 ERA. It's like if he pitches like a Cy Young candidate for like 2 or 3 months, he wouldn't be able to get into the 4s. I remember thinking that. I was like, dude, his season is so cooked.
There's a few. We don't have it in here, but he's one. Kyle Hendricks is one. Patrick Wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he hasn't. What was his specialty? Hitting lefties. I mean,
Supposed to be, yeah.
Supposed to be. It's like he didn't do that job. I think he's cooked, as the kids say. Kyle Hendricks definitely. He's sautéed, yeah, deglazed and red wine reduction.
Sounds more elegant than how his career actually or his season went.
Yeah, it didn't. We didn't quite have that type of meal preparation, but yeah. So I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of underperformance, and then you could also mention, you could mention Hector Neris and Adbert Alzolay. Obviously, Alzolay has been a complete letdown. I thought he was going to be able to bounce back and come back from his injury, but it's just been disastrous for a lot of our our bullpen, and I'll get into that right now as well. Zach, before I go on, do you have any thoughts on underperformance this year as far as like who has stood out for the worst?
I think you hit the nail on the head on some of those, especially with Wisdom. I think Bellinger even underperformed as well. He should have been in the 800 OPS range. He was injured too. So here's to hoping his last month of the season has done him well to opt out of his deal.
He does just enough to have another team other than the Cubs look at him. Yeah, I mean, that's maybe wishful thinking, but it'll be interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how many of these decisions impact the Cubs and their ability to maybe go out and get somebody or multiple players. So, injuries to the bullpen. Let's take a look at that. So our third takeaway here, the bullpen was absolutely just demolished. It was really sad. I mean, they had a lot of depth, and it's really just insane. One of the strengths I think of Jed Hoyer is his ability to kind of piece together the bullpen, and finding guys like Porter Hodge, with a 1.98 ERA, 50 Ks in 41 innings, less than a 1.0 WHIP, 0.92 WHIP. Miller, he had 2.27 ERA, 47 innings pitched, 41 K, 0.83 WHIP, and of course Jorge Lopez, who I really want the Cubs. Hopefully they can get him right health wise, and his groin checks out and all that. 2.03 ERA. 26 innings pitched, 31K, 1.09 WHIP. A lot of those guys are capable of closing games. I think that's what you have to have in the bullpen is, at least 2, maybe 3 guys, if you're lucky, to close a game. That was kind of our weakness was a closer. We had all these guys that were capable of maybe seventh inning or 8th inning, high leverage stuff. But Porter Hodge, besides that I don't know what that was. If that was a panic attack or what that he had versus LA.
Right.
Basically, I think is what you would classify it. But Merriweather was that was real sad. He wasn't able to bounce back. Luke Little was really sad too. I was really hoping for good things for him, especially being able to watch him in Texas, and seeing how big the guy is. It was really cool. Just kind of watching him pitch that little bit.
Yeah.
And of course, Yency Almonte. I think he's going to be great too.
Oh
I
yeah.
think get him healthy. Ben Brown. Maybe if you can throw in some neck exercises in the off season, strengthen that neck up. He's great. I mean, I think he's an X factor to this team next year. If they
Yeah.
could somehow keep him healthy, spot starts maybe. So obviously the bullpen was, even if they had made, I think, improvements to it, you could make a case. Well, the offense was also a letdown too. So maybe you do go and acquire, at the deadline, one or two pieces to supplement that bullpen. The back end of that is the offense was so inconsistent that, who knows if it really might have even
Right.
mattered.
Would have mattered. Yeah.
That's kind of, Jed Hoyer's probable, his excuse for not going to get somebody, other than Isaac Paredes.
Yeah. Who was also let down.
Yeah. And we'd go, Mark Leiter, junior to the Yanks.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of sad. I mean, I really liked him, and so I know, and at one point he was injured too, right?
Yeah. Pretty much the whole team is.
The whole bullpen was injured.
Whole
I mean,
bullpen is at some time on the injured list. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's been a really rough season. So I'm glad they had that little stretch run, for whatever that was, 10 games or 14 games.
Yeah.
That their offense just absolutely exploded, and it gave me some kind of hope and some kind of happiness to the season, and so it wasn't quite as long, but
Yeah.
I think it's good that, like we had mentioned, Counsell coming out and saying what he said, Dansby coming out and saying what he said. I think there's, he wants to raise the bar, as the quote is, on Twitter or whatever. I can't remember who was saying that, but anyways, they want to raise the bar. That's the main point. They got to get better. My thing is they should shoot for, 95 wins, not 90, but
yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on some positive additions to this season, PCA and others?
Yeah. So even though you and I are calling for Jed Hoyer's head, he, Jed Hoyer has actually gotten us some good production out of rookies, right? So the Jackson Ferris and Michael Busch trade, which also got us Yency Almonte. So actually, that was a really good trade. Almonte did pitch well. Michael Busch, as a rookie, 21 homers, 65 RBI, is one of the best Cubs rookie first baseman seasons. Rizzo took a while to sort of really take off as a rookie when he was here, just under an 800 OPS. PCA was traded for a few years ago, but man, has he really? He and Amaya were both really bad, at the start of the season, and they both improved quite a bit. Obviously, PCA at one point had a 700 OPS. At this point, towards the end of the season, 10 homers, 46 RBIs, 27 stolen bases, and he had like 20 in a row, I thought, before getting caught. Pretty impressive. So for him, he might be able to bat higher up in the batting order, steal bases, and cause havoc. And again, that defense, he's almost like a 3-WAR player. If he can hit 10 to 15 home runs, 60 to 70 RBIs, keep his OPS around 700, and steal 30 or 40 bags, I mean, he's going to be a massively huge impact to this team as a center fielder, and that will help us get over Bellinger's departure of the team if he does opt out. To me, the biggest takeaway for the Cubs in general, hate to steal the spotlight here, in the offseason, Shota Imanaga, signing him to a deal, and he's also considered rookie, even though he's like 30 years old. 15-3 season,
Yeah.
2.9 ERA. He actually pitched 173 innings, which is impressive because he was not really projected to go as far. They had him on a 6 man rotation or 6 day rotation at times. He still pitched 173 innings. That means he was going 6 or 7 innings most of the time.
Yeah.
Finished around with a 1 WHIP, struck out 9 per 9 innings. So the rookies were really good. I mean, that's why Jed Hoyer has not been fired yet, right? Um, so, um, were there any other points I missed there, or any other offseason moves that you liked that the Cubs made?
Well, Nick Madrigal got injured, so that was good.
Oh my
I hate to be that type of guy, but I think no, I think you basically hit the nail on the head there. PCA, I think, has so much potential, um, especially if it can just hit a little bit more, swing at curveballs a little less.
God. Hmm.
Especially ones that are low on and inside. Seems like, oh, man, those are killer. Those low inside or the curveballs at the feet. You know,
Yeah,
inside part of the plate. Those are hard to look at when he swings, but um, it seems like he's kind of cut down on those. And when he gets on the base paths, man, he is like they say, must see TV. It seems like he has a really great chance to score and steal at least one, maybe two bases when he's on base. Um, just insane speed. Um, yeah, I think you definitely have to flirt with maybe batting him leadoff. Like I said, if he can maintain a decent on base percentage and draw
yeah,
walks more, strike out a little less, I think he's on his way. I mean, he's still really young too. Um, so, I mean, Bush, he's been a great pickup. I don't know if he's quite the answer at first base. Do you go out and get somebody like a first baseman? And we'll talk, into the future on future podcasts. We'll talk more about that too. Um, but he's been great too. Michael
yeah,
Bush has really been great. So Imanaga, like you said, I mean, 30-year-old rookie. He's gone. Yeah, he went from a 6 man rotation to a 5 man rotation. 173 innings pitched is tremendous for him. And so
yeah,
hopefully his arm holds up in the offseason. Nothing's injured by the end of the season. And, he's able to give us another 160, 170 innings pitched next year. So
yeah, for sure. Uh,
that's, I have nothing else to add. That's a long way to answer that.
the last takeaway I have is that there's going to be budget for the Cubs to go out and get more players, as many are coming off the books. The Cubs finished middle of the pack in runs per game because they went on a pretty big stretch here the second half in terms of offense. Um, can they improve their hitting, get closer to the top of the pack, add another run per game of offense? Or is it a starter? What will the impact additions be this offseason? Because it's clear that they need a star, right?
Right.
They might get a star hitter. Maybe they make a trade, like you mentioned. Maybe you move Bush over to second, and he's still athletic, or Shaw can play second. Maybe you get a first baseman. Maybe you trade Paredes. There's options the Cubs could do to add a star hitter. Will they go out and get a starter this offseason? There's guys like Max Fried, Jack Flaherty, Corbin Burns. If they add one of those, they could improve their bullpen even more. If guys like Wicks and Assad or Horton and Brown could spell time in the pen or spot starts. So before we end this, I just wanted to ask if you think they'll add a star, or do you think it'll be on the hitting side, or you think they'll be able to go out and either trade for or land a free agent pitcher?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think the offense, they need both. I mean, they need a slugger and they need a legit starting arm. I think you need to push Justin Steele to the number 2 spot, and Imanaga at the 3. I think is perfect. I think that's a World Series team. If you can acquire an ace, I would say probably the higher need would be the offense.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're pitching. They have the pitching depth. Certainly not going to hurt to acquire a like a Max Fried or Jack Flaherty, that type of player. I think they're definitely going to have to, like you have here, consolidate the farm a little bit for a star. So they are going to have to make some really tough decisions. Who do you keep? Who do you get rid of in order to acquire somebody like a Pete Alonso? But he's going to be a free agent anyways. But somebody like that, a slugger, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like for them to get Juan Soto, but I don't think that's. I agree that offense. I'm sure they'll get a catcher, and I'm sure that they'll try to get maybe a guy like Santander or
Yeah,
I'm beating the drum for Vlad Guerrero. I just don't know if they'll make it happen.
I think Vlad Guerrero sounds like a great option. I think he provides some defense as well. Juan Soto's defense, I think, is maybe a little bit shoddy. His offense is tremendous. Obviously, we know what he brings to the table. But I think Juan Soto would just be an insane. I think it'd be, the asking price would be astronomical, and I don't think they would go there unless it was somebody like an Otani.
Yeah.
Which obviously that failed, but I think they do need a slugger. They do need to try and get an ace as well. If they can't do both, then they need to start trading because they have a plethora of prospects, which I'm excited for. I hope they keep a considerable amount of them. So who knows? Maybe they even trade from the major league roster, right? Like maybe they even trade Horner, which a lot of people are mentioning they might do to make way for somebody like Triantos. So
yeah, or Shaw.
Or Shaw, yeah. I mean, there's so many, right? There's Owen Casey, just real quick. I mean, there's Owen Casey, there's Matt Shaw, there's Mo Baller. Who else?
Casey Shaw, Triantos, Alcantara.
That's Triantos. I forgot Triantos, Alcantara. Yeah, I mean, there's I might even trade Alcantara. You got Cam Smith as well, right? So
yeah, he's already up to Double A. He's going
Double
to
A,
start
right?
Double A next year.
Right. So I mean, there's a lot, and that's not even like even in the lower levels. You know, Christian Hernandez. I mean, there's a ton of guys that they could pull from. So they don't necessarily have to trade their top guys. But
yeah.
Any closing thoughts, Zach?
Nothing for me.
You're like, I've said all I need to say. All right. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us here on the Brotherly Cubs podcast. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, or join the conversation with us on Twitter at Brotherly Cubs or Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'm your big brother, John.
And I am the little brother, Zach.
And we will see you next week when the season has ended and all is right in the world again.
And the playoffs begin.
And the playoffs begin. Yay. Until next time, thanks for tuning in to the pod, and we will catch you later. Peace.